You will think me mad. I see it already in your expression. Or rather, in the expression I imagine you would wear if you stood here in my study on this 8th Halloween, since my beloved Lenore departed this world. But hear me out before you pass judgment, for I maintain that everything I did was born of love, and that love, in its purest and most terrible form, recognizes no boundary between devotion and desecration. I carved my wife's skull into a jack-o'-lantern. There, the fact stands naked and unadorned. No gentle approach, no careful euphemism can soften it. On the night of October 30th, 1884, I took a bone saw to my wife's severed head and transformed her skull into the very thing she loved most in this world, a Halloween lantern, complete with hollow eyes and a grinning mouth. Ready to hold a candle and cast its light into the darkness, and every October 31st since, I have lit that candle and sat in communion with what she became. Now let me tell you why. Welcome to Fright Club. Subscribe for more. Now, my Lenore. My Lenore was strange even by my generous measure of strangeness. While other ladies concerned themselves with needlework and calling cards, she collected medical texts and carved pumpkins with the intensity of Michelangelo approaching marble. I remember the evening that sealed both our fates, though I did not know it then. October, 3 years before her death. She sat on our parlor floor surrounded by 11 pumpkins, carving knife in hand, lamplight catching the dark cascade of her hair. "The pumpkin is the only honest art form," she said, not looking up from her work. The knife made soft, wet sounds as it cut. A portrait lies for centuries. A sculpture pretends at permanence. But a jack-o'-lantern knows it's dying. The rot is part of the beauty. Each day the face collapses further into itself, becomes more grotesque, more true. She set down the pumpkin and reached for one of her anatomical texts. They were never far from her reach. She opened to an illustration of a human skull and traced its curve with one finger. This is what we all are underneath. Pure form. Absolute honesty. When I carve a pumpkin, I'm making a temporary skull, acknowledging that all faces are just meat stretched over bone, and the bone is the only truth that matters. A grim philosophy for something meant to delight children, I said. Her eyes met mine with unsettling directness. Not grim, liberating. When I die, this flesh will fall away and my skull will remain, for a time, and it will be more truly me than my face ever was, because it won't be performing, won't be lying. Promise me something. Anything. When I die, celebrate Halloween in my memory. Remember that I love the honesty of bones, the beauty of decay, the truth beneath the flesh. I crossed to her and took her hand. You're being absurd. You'll outlive me by decades. Promise anyway. And because I loved her beyond reason, I did. 3 weeks later, we celebrated Halloween together. She lit all 11 jack-o'-lanterns. In the candlelight, their carved faces seemed almost alive, shadows dancing in hollow eyes. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Perfect," she murmured. It was the last perfect moment of my life. The fever struck with terrible swiftness the following October. On the 27th, she was well. On the 28th, she complained of headache. By evening, she was abed with a fever that no compress could cool. I sent for Dr. Marsh at midnight. He examined her with methodical precision. Pulse, temperature, chest auscultation, pupil response. When he finished, his face was grave. The fever has induced a catatonic state. The body withdraws, you understand, shuts down all but essential functions. He would not meet my eyes. I have seen patients recover from such states. I have also seen them slip away. But she's alive. Currently, yes. However, he paused, consulting his pocket watch as though it held answers. Such states can be difficult to distinguish from death itself. The breathing becomes imperceptible, the pulse nearly undetectable, the body grows cold. One might think the patient expired when some spark yet remains. He left laudanum and departed with promises to return at dawn. I sat vigil through that endless night. Lenore lay motionless, her breathing so faint I had to lean close to detect any movement. Her skin was cold. She looked already dead. When Dr. Marsh returned on the morning of October 29th, he brought a colleague, young Dr. Brennan, recently finished with his studies. They examined her together, speaking in low medical Latin. Finally, Dr. Marsh straightened. "I am deeply sorry. Your wife has passed. I would estimate she expired in the early morning hours. The fever has taken her." "No, she was breathing. I saw..." The final respirations can be very subtle, almost imperceptible. In your exhausted state, you may have seen what you wish to see. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "She is gone. I am truly sorry." He signed the death certificate without hesitation. Lenore Wainwright, age 32, died October 29th, 1884, cause fever of unknown origin. Then he left me alone with her body. I sat beside her for hours as the idea formed. October 29th, 2 days before Halloween. 2 days before the holiday she loved above all others. She would never light her jack-o'-lanterns. Never see their grinning faces dance with candlelight. Never celebrate the honesty of bones she had preached with such passion. Unless I found a way to make her part of it. Not just to honor her memory, but to transform her into the art form she valued above all others. To create a jack-o'-lantern that would not rot, carved from the most honest material, the truth beneath the flesh. When I die, my skull will remain. It will be more truly me than my face ever was. She had told me exactly what she wanted. I simply had not understood until now. When the servants came that afternoon to pay respects, I dismissed them, sent them away until November 1st. When the undertaker arrived, I told him there had been a mistake, that my wife had recovered, that his services were not needed. He departed, shaking his head at grief's strange expressions. I locked all the doors, drew all the curtains, and when darkness fell, I carried Lenore's body down to the cellar workshop where she had carved her pumpkins. Her tools hung on the pegboard in neat rows. Serrated knives for cutting tops, detail blades for carving features, scoops for removing pulp. Her 11 finished jack-o'-lanterns sat waiting to be lit. I laid her on the workbench, gently, reverently. She had gone rigid, rigor mortis freezing her in repose. I brought down her anatomical texts and studied them by lamplight, the cervical spine structure, the neck musculature, the clean approach for separation. I was no physician, but I was careful. I was devoted. I selected my tools, the largest knife, the bone saw from its velvet case, purchased years ago when Lenore had wanted to articulate skeletons but never used, smaller blades for detail work. Then I hesitated at the threshold between intent and action. I reached for the laudanum Dr. Marsh had left, poured a generous dose, more than generous, enough to deeply sedate a living person, to induce profound insensibility to pain. I told myself it was for preservation. I did not examine why one would give drugs to a corpse. I tilted back her head, opened her mouth, poured the laudanum down her throat. Then I picked up the knife and made the first cut. The human body is not like a pumpkin. The skin parts easily enough under a sharp blade. A horizontal line at the base of the throat, following the curve of the clavicle. But beneath the skin is yellow fat, then silvery fascia, then muscle that resists the knife, that must be cut through layer by layer. No blood came. The heart had stopped pumping hours ago. I worked methodically, referring to the anatomical plates, extended the incision laterally, deepened it through tissue. The smell grew stronger, not rot yet, but the smell of meat, of the body's interior exposed to air. I had to pause several times, not from physical difficulty, but from the weight of what I was doing. I was dismantling my wife, reducing her to components, to truth. The skull cannot lie, I told myself. This is what she wanted. Hours passed. The muscles separated. The vessels lay collapsed and empty. The trachea and esophagus had to be navigated carefully. Finally, the cervical spine lay exposed, 7 small bones decreasing in size, connected by discs and ligaments. The bone saw bit into vertebra with a sound like sandpaper on wood. I supported her head with one hand while sawing with the other. Bone dust fell like snow, white and fine, settling on my sleeves. I felt the moment the saw broke through. The final resistance gave way. Her head separated from her body. I lifted it with both hands and set it on clean cloth. As I worked, I heard sounds, soft scraping, rhythmic, like breathing. I told myself it was the house settling, the wind outside. I did not let myself think about what else it might be. I wrapped the headless body in canvas and placed it in the coal bin. Then I turned all my attention to the head, to what I would make of it. The reduction of head to skull is its own nightmare. The scalp must be peeled away from cranial bone. The face, that assemblage of features that makes a person individual, must be stripped down to anonymous architecture. I began at the neck and worked upward. The skin adhered stubbornly to underlying tissue. I used blade and fingers both, peeling, cutting, separating through the complex musculature of facial expression. The zygomaticus, the orbicularis oris, the masseter. I named them as I worked, as though Latin made it surgical rather than butchery. The eyes were worst. I will not detail their removal beyond saying it involves severing muscles and nerves and careful excavation from orbital cavities. When finished, the sockets were hollow, empty, ready for candlelight. I worked through the day and into the night of October 30th, Halloween Eve. By midnight, I had reduced Lenore's head to its essential truth. The skull lay before me, stripped of flesh, cleaned of tissue, white and honest in lamplight. It was beautiful, the smooth cranial curve, the delicate facial architecture, the teeth in their neat rows. She had been right. This was more truly her than any face, but it was not yet a jack-o'-lantern. I slept briefly, then woke at dawn on October 31st, Halloween, and began the carving. I had her favorite jack-o'-lantern as my model, the one she'd been most proud of. Large round eyes, triangular nose, wide toothy grin balanced between mirth and menace. The orbits needed only smoothing and slight enlargement with a file. The nasal cavity required minimal modification. The smile was the challenge. I marked the pattern in pencil directly on bone. The grin needed to curve upward at corners, expose teeth properly, balance perfectly between welcome and warning. Then I began cutting. Bone resists. The saw blade skittered on the surface before finally biting. I bore down with pressure and began the slow work of carving through maxilla and mandible. The grinding screech set my teeth on edge. Hours passed. My hand cramped. I did not stop. As I worked, the sounds came again. Scraping, rhythmic and insistent, like fingernails on wood, like fingernails on bone. I looked toward the coal bin. The canvas was still. Nothing moved. And beneath the scraping, another sound. Softer but unmistakable once I let myself hear it. Breathing. Shallow and labored. Impossible. She was dead. Dr. Marsh had pronounced her dead. The breathing continued. I made a choice then. I retrieved the laudanum bottle and crossed to the coal bin. Unwrapped enough canvas to expose the neck stump. I poured the remaining laudanum down the opening of her throat. For preservation, I whispered. So you won't... I could not finish. The breathing stopped. The scraping stopped. I rewrapped the canvas and returned to my work. By dusk on October 31st, the carving was complete. The skull bore the exact expression of Lenore's favorite jack-o'-lantern. I had carved the top away in a careful circle, creating a lid for placing the candle inside. Now came the test. I brought the skull upstairs to my study and placed it on my desk. I positioned a fine beeswax candle inside the cranial cavity and struck the match with trembling hands. The flame caught, grew, steadied. Light filled the skull from within. The bone became luminous, seeming to glow with inner fire. Light poured through the eye sockets in twin beams, creating the illusion of eyes both present and absent. The carved smile became radiant, shifting between welcome and menace with each flicker. It was exactly what she had created in Pumpkin, but permanent, eternal, true. I wept. Whether from grief or triumph or horror, I could not say. I only knew I had kept my promise. The candle burned until midnight, when Halloween gave way to November. I extinguished it, wrapped the skull in velvet, locked it in a chest, and slept better than I had since her death. The servants returned November 1st to find me composed. I had sealed Lenore's body in its casket myself. The funeral proceeded. Dr. Marsh signed the burial certificate without viewing the body. Distant relations expressed condolences. The casket was buried beneath a headstone reading, "The truth beneath." One housemaid noticed the skull on my study shelf and remarked it was unusual. "An anatomical model," I said, "for study." She found it macabre, but said nothing more. In my study, wrapped in velvet and locked in a chest, the bone lantern rested. My secret, my sacrament. 7 years I maintained the ritual. Year 1. I lit the bone lantern with terror, expecting retribution. But when the flame filled those hollow eyes, I felt only peace, communion, as though some part of her remained in the honest bone. Year 3. I heard her voice, not aloud, but in my mind, responses to my words, comments on my thoughts. I knew it was imagination born of isolation, but it comforted me nonetheless. I began structuring my entire year around this single night. Year 6. Strange things happened. The candle flame behaved impossibly, perfectly still, despite drafts, then flickering in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost communicative. When I tried to interpret the pattern, it dissolved into randomness. Year 7. I woke on November 1st to find the bone lantern had moved. I had positioned it facing the window. I found it facing my chair, eye sockets oriented directly toward where I had slept. I told myself I had moved it unconsciously. I did not believe myself. Something was building. Something was changing. The boundary between past and present was wearing thin. And this year, this 8th Halloween, the truth would finally reveal itself. Yesterday was October 30th. I retrieved the bone lantern from its chest and carried it to the cellar for my annual cleaning. I dusted the exterior, then turned my attention to the interior cavity. My cloth snagged on roughness that should not have been there. I brought a lamp close and looked inside. Scratches. Fine lines scored into the interior surface of the cranium, deep enough to cut through the outer bone layer, clustered most densely near where the lid fits into place. The marks one would make with fingernails if trapped and desperate to escape. I studied them with a magnifying glass. They showed directional scoring from inside, dragging with terrible urgency. Some overlapped, as though made repeatedly in the same spot, trying to weaken the bone, trying to break through. These marks had not been there before. I was certain. I knew every surface of the bone lantern intimately, except they had always been there. I simply had never let myself see them. The memory returned like a wave, drowning me. Dr. Marsh's words. Such states can be difficult to distinguish from death itself. The breathing becomes imperceptible, the pulse nearly undetectable, an estimate of death, not a certainty, based on observation, on apparent cessation of vital signs. What if the fever had induced a state so like death that even a physician could mistake it? When had I begun my work? Midnight on October 29th. 20 hours after the pronouncement, I had administered laudanum before beginning. Why would I give drugs to a corpse? Because I needed her still. To not move, to not make sounds, which meant I knew she might move, might make sounds, which meant I knew she was not dead. The sounds I had heard while working, the breathing, the scraping, all real. Lenore had been alive when I began. Perhaps the laudanum rendered her unconscious. Perhaps she felt nothing, or perhaps she felt everything. The knife through her throat, the saw through her spine, the peeling of her face, the carving of her skull. Perhaps she was conscious for all of it, paralyzed and unable to scream. And in the final moments, after I'd reduced her to skull, after I poured more laudanum down her neck stump, perhaps she regained enough movement to reach up, to scratch at the inside of her own skull. A last desperate message before blood loss and shock and laudanum finally killed her. The scratches are not supernatural. They are my wife's fingernails scraping bone in her final living moments. And I have spent 8 years lighting a candle inside the skull she died trying to escape. I sit now in my study, October 31st, Halloween night. The bone lantern sits before me. I should flee, should smash it, should end this, but I cannot. Something compels me forward, perhaps guilt demanding punishment. Perhaps the ritual too deeply ingrained to break. Perhaps something else. Something that has been growing stronger each Halloween. Something that wants me to complete the ritual one final time. The candle sits ready. My hand shakes as I strike the match. The flame catches. I place it inside the skull. Light fills the bone from within. But the light is wrong. Cold. Pale blue like moonlight, like the phosphorescence of decay. The eye sockets are darker than they should be, wells of shadow extending beyond the skull's physical boundaries. The carved smile shifts. The mandible separates from the maxilla, hanging open wider than my carving would allow. I hear scratching from inside the skull, rhythmic, purposeful. Then it stops. Silence. Then breathing, shallow, ragged, patient. The breathing of someone who has held their breath for 8 years. From within the skull comes a voice like wind through bone. Hello, my love. Did you miss me? The bone lantern rises from the desk, floats, rotates so those hollow eyes can study me. 8 years you've kept your promise. How devoted, how loving. Do you know what it's like to be conscious while your head is cut from your body? To feel the saw through your spine? to watch your face peeled away and be unable to scream. Lenore, I thought you were dead. You knew. You heard me breathing. You saw me move. You gave me laudanum to keep me quiet. You carved me while I was alive and you knew it. The bone glows red hot. I smell burning. But I was patient. 8 years, growing stronger each Halloween, feeding on flame. Feeding on your guilt, and now I'm finally strong enough. The bone lantern moves closer. Heat radiates from it. To show you, to make you understand, to give you what you gave me. Light explodes from the eye sockets, searing my vision. I see through Lenore's eyes, feel the first cut, the saw through bone, every moment of horror as I carved her while she lived. The vision releases me. I collapse, gasping. Now you know, but knowledge isn't enough. You must experience it. The skull descends. Eye sockets fill my vision. Cold light pours into me. I try to move. Cannot. Try to scream. Cannot. Paralyzed as she was paralyzed. Don't worry, the voice whispers with terrible love. I'll be gentle. I learned from the best teacher. She will not kill me. She will carve my consciousness, reduce me to essential truth, trap what remains inside my own skull. And every Halloween for eternity, she will light a candle inside me, make me burn, make me feel flame eating the space where my brain once lived. She will keep me as I kept her. Happy Halloween, my love. The light consumes me. I begin to scream, though no sound escapes, though the scream will continue forever inside the prison of my bone. The last thing I see is my carved smile stretched impossibly wide across glowing bone. The last thing I know is that I deserve this. Editor's note. The manuscript ends here. The writer was discovered November 1st, 1892, dead at his desk. Official cause, heart failure. His face bore an expression of utmost terror. His mouth was open in a silent scream. Most disturbing were the burns. Hands and face showed severe thermal injury, though nothing else in the study showed signs of fire. The burns were confined solely to his extremities, with no apparent source. A human skull was found on the desk. Initial examination suggested a woman, 35 years old, modified by carving. The interior showed scratch marks, as though made by fingernails. The cranial cavity contained cooled wax. The skull matched the records of Lenore Wainwright, the deceased's wife, who died 8 years earlier. Her grave was opened November 3rd. The casket contained a headless body. The head had never been buried. The skull was placed in evidence lockup. On November 4th, the lockup was broken into. All locks remained intact. All windows sealed. Only the skull was taken. The constable responsible resigned and left the district. He could not be located. The house at 47 Blackwood Lane has changed hands 7 times. Each owner reports that every October 31st, the study smells of burning bone and beeswax. Each hears soft scratching from within the walls. Current owners leave the house on Halloween night and return November the 1st. They do not ask questions. As for the skull, its whereabouts remain unknown. But there are rumors. A carved human skull appearing in different houses on Halloween, glowing from within when no candle is lit, watching through empty eyes, waiting. Some promises can never be broken, some art can never be unmade, and some loves, once twisted into horror, can never be redeemed.